Have you ever had that feeling that maybe history isn't just a random series of events? What if it's all following a script, a kind of secret roadmap for the world, written down thousands of years ago? Well, that's the incredible idea we're diving into today.
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're looking at a text that makes a pretty huge claim. It says that those cryptic, strange visions you read about in the book of Daniel aren't just myths or stories. They're actually a coded chronicle of empires, past, present, and even future. The idea is that history isn't random at all. It's a specific sequence of events that was laid out long ago.
So how in the world would you even begin to unlock something like that? According to the author we're looking at, the master key to this entire system is a single, powerful vision. 4 massive beasts rising up out of the sea. And this isn't just one story among many. It's presented as the absolute foundation for decoding everything else that follows.
Now, what's really interesting is how the author frames this. This isn't just poetry. Nope. In this view, it's a literal description of a cosmic transfer of power. It's a divine handover, moving authority from all these temporary earthly kingdoms, the ones represented by the beasts, to one final everlasting kingdom.
Okay, so how does the author actually start to crack this code? Well, the very first step is to connect each of those symbolic beasts to a specific real-world empire from history. This is exactly where ancient history and this prophetic interpretation collide head-on.
And here you can see the core theory in action. The claim is that these beasts don't just show up randomly. They appear in a specific historical sequence that, according to the text, lines up perfectly with the great powers that dominated the ancient world. You've got Egypt, followed by Mesopotamia, then Media-Persia, and finally Greece. It's a direct, one-for-one mapping. And the decoding gets even more specific. It doesn't just stop at the big picture. For example, the prophecy says the 4th beast, which this text identifies as Greece, has 10 horns. Now, you might think that's just a weird, random detail, right? Well, not in this framework. The author argues those 10 horns represent the most powerful and influential Greek city-states, like Athens and Sparta, the very building blocks of that empire. So, this system isn't just about figuring out who the prophecies are about. It also claims to tell us when these things are supposed to happen. And to do that, the author uses a special key for unlocking the timing. In the source text, you'll find passages that mention specific time periods, like 1260 days. Now, here is the absolute game changer for this entire interpretation. The author uses what's called the day for a year principle. The idea is simple. Every time you see the word day in one of these prophecies, you're actually supposed to read it as one literal calendar year. And this principle is absolutely critical. It's the engine that lets these timelines stretch across huge spans of history. It's how you take a prophecy about, say, 1260 days and turn it into 1260 years of actual history. It's the mechanism that connects the ancient world all the way to our modern era.
And this is where the whole interpretation takes a dramatic pivot. We're moving on from ancient empires and into events and institutions that are much, much closer to our own time. In this view, the prophetic clock didn't stop ticking with Greece or Rome. It's still going, right up to the present day.
So when you use this system, decoding the beasts and applying that day for a year principle, the author starts making some astonishing connections. We're talking about linking major historical figures like Napoleon and Hitler and modern groups like the EU and the UN Security Council directly back to that ancient prophetic blueprint.
Just to give you a really concrete example of how this works, there are ancient prophecies about a revived Roman Empire that will appear in the last days. Well, this interpretation looks right at the European Union and says, there it is, that's the fulfillment. The logic is that the EU is essentially reuniting the old territories of the Roman Empire just under a new system of government.
And it's not just about Europe. The author gives a very specific role to the United States, too. The U.S. is interpreted as being a modern-day Shepherd David figure, a nation whose prophetic destiny is to protect and support Israel, especially in the end times.
So, this all brings us to the prophetic endgame. This is where all the different threads of history and prophecy are said to finally converge, leading to a series of final events that, in this view, will bring the current world order to a dramatic close.
The climax of this entire historical timeline is a final, decisive conflict we've all heard of, Armageddon. But the author doesn't see this as just some symbolic idea. It's identified with a real-world location, Megiddo in Israel, a place that's been a famous battlefield for thousands of years.
The text also points to very specific signs that are supposed to happen right before this final battle. One of the biggest ones is the prophecy about the drying up of the Euphrates River.
And in this interpretation, this isn't about a drought. It's seen as a symbolic event with a very real purpose, to clear a path for an alliance of Eastern nations, which the author identifies as countries like Iran and China, allowing their armies to march west toward that final battleground.
So you see how all the pieces are meant to fit together. You've got this revived European empire, these specific signs happening in the Middle East, and this massive Eastern army on the move. According to the author, that's the sequence of events that triggers the final, world-changing battle.
So when you take a step back, the key takeaway is that this text presents a complete, interlocking system where everything, from ancient history to today's headlines, is seen as part of a single divine plan. And that leaves us all with a pretty profound question, doesn't it? If history really is a script that was written long, long ago, what does that say about the role of human choice? Are we just actors playing our parts, or do we still get to decide what happens next?